Thank you, Julie, and thank you for asking me to come and getting my email straightened out for the small firm exchange, because I'm definitely a part of the small firm exchange. So when I took and I was voted in as president for this year, prior to COVID, social unrest, and everything else that's going on, equity and design, in my speech, I wanted to ensure that every firm, if at all possible, would be signed up for the 2030 challenge. I know our office has been taking a lot of our projects very seriously in small manners, right? We haven't been able to do large, big, bold steps. Although there was one project finally that I think we're going to be able to take a large, bold step on. We've done some lead projects, but not the initiatives that I think really need to actually happen. And I think that it's important for small firms to be able to take baby steps. Any steps are better than no steps at all. And I really wanted every firm to sign up and to be educated, because I think the idea of demystifying this is really important, because I am in a kerfuffle over it. So part of our mission, part of my mission for the presidency for this year, is to try to get everyone signed up and to get everyone, to make everyone aware and educated as much as possible on what we have done, what we are doing, and what we can do in the future to eliminate climate change and to move forward in a positive direction and better equip our buildings with sustainability and forward thought. So the month of November, we were starting off with having a 2030 challenge symposium that we were going to do November 12th and 13th. We've just made a conscious decision, because we can't guarantee that we can meet in person, that we are going to have an entire 2030 challenge month. And we're going to break it up into small webinars that entire month that show how extra small projects, small, medium, large, and extra large projects are tackling this commitment and challenge, as well as teach how, or not teach, but educate on how to work better, design better, provide better equity, and how in the design, and how the climate challenge and the 2030 commitment is all encompassing. It's not just about the building, it's about the urban fabric. It's about what we're doing to different people and how we can better adjust our own thoughts and thinking for the future. So I'm going to let Shea take it away, and thank you, Julie, for inviting me. Or thank you for letting me speak, not inviting me.
All right, so thank you. And I totally understand the feeling of the kind of daunting nature of taking on the 2030 commitment. I had just become an associate at Trapolin Peer, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm Shea Trahan. I'm an associate and architect at Trapolin Peer. I have Matthew Beyer with me today. He's one of the architects in the firm who has been helping with some of our sustainability initiatives. I serve on the board for the Louisiana chapter of the USGBC. I'm a lead AP. And even with all of that, when we signed the 2030 commitment, I had just become an associate, and it was like a no-brainer. It was like, yeah, we should be doing this. And then a few shifts of responsibility landed the 2030 commitment on my desk. And I'll be honest, it was a 4-letter word that came out of my mouth when I figured out that it was on my shoulders to learn how to do this. And it is really all about baby steps. And today we're not going to go into a whole lot of detail about exactly how you get the source or site EUI and all of the highly technical stuff. That would really be best saved for the webinar series in November. And November is probably pretty good timing for this, because though you could sign up today and make your commitment and still meet the deadline, which is an extended deadline for this year due to COVID, of July 15th, it's probably not best practice to just jump in and give yourself 6 days to try and report. And so instead, what we're going to cover today is kind of the earnestness with which we began to engage this process, how little we knew, the things that we were surprised that we knew, and then the myriad ways that it's kind of manifested into our firm culture, and the kind of unintended consequences that have emerged from just having some accountability to report at the end of each year. So we signed the commitment in 2016, if I'm not mistaken. And the 2030 commitment in a nutshell is that by the year 2030, the goal is to have your entire catalog of projects attaining net zero carbon impact, or 100% below the baseline, which is how everything in the 2030 commitment is judged. It's an incremental process, and so up until, all of the projects we've done thus far have been shooting for the 2015 increment, which was to be 70% below baseline. In the year 2020, it's moved up to 80% below baseline. In 2025, it'll become 90%, and then by 2030, you reach 100%. And just to be clear, 100% carbon neutral is assuming that you are going to be relying on renewables in some way. Like the act of building a building is going to have a carbon footprint. And so you really have to cross the threshold into offsetting and renewables to reach that goal. One of the issues we faced as a firm that does about half new construction and half historic restoration is, how do we talk about this in terms of adaptive reuse of historic buildings? Because a lot of those projects are tax credit projects and have some tight limitations on the existing building envelope that we don't necessarily have the ability to turn the building 90 degrees and put louvers on all the windows. So we'll kind of discuss as well how we found ways to kind of talk about that handicap and address it in some way. And I'm going to be totally informal because I don't do formal. And so interrupt at any point with questions. And I'm going to be honest, when we started, we were really bad at this. The first year we reported, we had one project that was going to be energy modeled, and everything else just said not going to be modeled. And if you take nothing else from today, just take the fact that that's okay. That's step one, is just starting to document and starting to record what it is you're doing. And the next year we had 2 or 3, and the year after we had 3 or 4, and now we're seeing more projects in our office modeled. The AIA has a really thorough website with a lot of frequently asked questions, a lot of tutorials. When you sign up, when you make the commitment, really the only thing required to make the commitment is the letter of intent, basically saying that you plan to do so. And then AIA in 2030 really start to provide you with a lot of tools to start to understand how to get into the DDX reporting software, what it even means to benchmark this thing, how to measure success down the road, things of that sort. And so, like I said, I think those are the things best left for November. We will see some of it in our process, but we're just going to talk about, again, how this has imprinted itself into our own culture. And so after you make the commitment, the very next step for the process is to publish a sustainability action plan. And this is not a prescriptive measure. It is a requirement, but some firms' sustainability action plan is as simple as a text-based bullet point letter on letterhead, single page, saying these are the steps we plan to take in the next 1 year, in the next 5 years, whatever it may be. It's just about putting pencil to paper and starting to say, here's ways we can start to implement this. TPA took longer than we should have, but we really wanted to do justice to this process. And so are y'all able to see the entire screen? Because I have video covering a part of the left, but if y'all are good, we're good. And so we not only took on the topic of how we were going to adjust our practice, and our firm as a entity of business, a carbon consuming company, but also what are some tangential elements that we can talk about in relation to this that are also critically important to us. And then we kind of went back into our catalog and started looking at some of the most successful examples of projects we've done. And then we actually did a very pretty in-depth case study on our own office as a kind of living experiment. And we learned some really encouraging and some really challenging lessons in that process. So our sustainability action plan is available on issue. It's published open. When you submit your plan to 2030, that is one of the few things that they actually share. And so you can go through and see other firms. You can see how our TKL is approaching this, or pull up EDRs and see how Z has tackled this. And that was another thing making this daunting, is that you have this giant of sustainability in your town. And what we actually found was when we'd hit a wall, we'd just pick up the phone and call him, and he would tell us exactly what to do. And so I'd like to officially kind of make that same offer to everyone here today, that I can give you a million stories of how we did it wrong, or mistakes we made, and ways to save yourself time and energy. But in making our commitment, we expanded it beyond just sustainable building practices, but we added in adaptive reuse, energy efficiency, resiliency, and then building wellness as part of our sustainability action plan, because we wanted to really take a look at what TPA was doing holistically, aside from just meeting the client's bottom line. And so each of these topics, like adaptive reuse, we have a series of bullet points here. Actions are things we're working on, things that we've actually accomplished. Goals are our own inner mission kind of setting goals. Some of those include, like in the section on resiliency, we said, we did some calculations and realized that in the first 18 months of the city's stormwater management plan, we had finished 9 projects, and those projects are estimated to retain 429,000 gallons of stormwater per rain event. And that leads to millions of gallons per year. And that's just meeting code, right? And so our goal we set ourselves is that we're increasing our stormwater retention percentage on our own voluntarily, incrementally each year, so that by the year 2030, we're hopefully obtaining double the stormwater requirements for a project. We'll see if we meet that goal, but and then building wellness deals. We addressed a lot of daylighting and acoustics issues, which are addressed in LEED projects, but don't necessarily factor totally into the 2030 commitment. And so I present this as it was an opportunity for us to really take a look at who we are as a firm, what we're doing, and to talk about these things in an organized manner, put it on paper so that everyone in the firm can open it up anytime they need to. And then we set ourselves a goal that we're going to update it every 2 years, even numbered years. So as I'm pulling this back out, I'm realizing that that's something I have to do this summer. So I guess I'll get on that. We also included in our sustainability action plan a case study of our own office, because it so well exemplifies a lot of the work that we do. It's partial new construction, partial adaptive reuse of a historic building. It was a tax credit project, and so there were limitations on what we could do with, original single pane steel windows, things of that sort. And not only did we track the energy usage, over about 3 or 4 years, which is another thing we're going to update in this new increment of the 2020 version. of our sustainability action plan. But we also asked about, building comfort, security, safety, acoustics has been a big problem. We came to learn this. We also learned that by tracing our energy bills, we were functioning at a slightly higher level than our design had shot for in relation to the 2030 benchmarking. And so that has led to members in the office looking for strategies to use natural ventilation whenever weather allows, seeking more sustainable paper use and consumption within the office. It's really impacted everything we've done. We even bought an office bike in the process of doing this to reduce our carbon imprint for small trips around downtown. Just to go to City Hall, you don't need to take a car and pay for parking. You can use the bike. What we learned is that the kind of national median energy use intensity for an office, a mid-size office, it comes in at a factor of about 90, and our 2030 goal was to hit around 27. And between May of 2014 and September of 2017, we were actually operating at about 48.1 based on our energy bills. And so it'll be interesting in this new iteration to see how we've improved on that, hopefully, in the last 2 years. And then there was a lot of kind of standard building comfort and occupancy survey elements within this. And then we cited, because we're standing on the shoulders of giants, we cited a lot of the source research from which we conducted this. As with any good paper, I would recommend y'all go steal our sustainability action plan and download the work cited, and there's your starting point. And if you come across some other great sources, please let us know. The EPA has published quite a bit of stuff. The Department of Defense, believe it or not, is really a leader in the field of researching the carbon impact of adaptive reuse of buildings, because they own so many buildings. It's a lot of them, especially built in like the late 1800s on army bases and things of that sort, that it's in their best interest to know whether they should tear that building down or build a new one, or retrofit it. And so they have a rather robust set of publications that can be very helpful for anyone working in the adaptive reuse realm. So we published that. Like I said, the first year of reporting, and let me touch real quickly on what reporting looks like. Okay. Do y'all see an Excel spreadsheet now? Okay. So this is, I just opened up the last reporting batch from last year. And so I'm going to be in the next 6 days updating this per 2020 for TPA. This Excel spreadsheet is actually a template that 2030 gives you. You can file one of two ways. You can either use their online portal, the DDX, to input each of these items about every project and create a project per page, or you can use their batch template and basically update your projects, anything that was active that year. Even if you reported it the previous year, you include in this, and then you can upload that single file and it populates your report for that year. And it's surprisingly easy. And so you can see that by now for 2019, we have about a half dozen projects that will be robustly energy modeled. I would say there are more projects in our office that people are tinkering with the energy modeling for. We really learned a lot in some of our lead projects because they require the mechanical engineers or subs to basically provide the architect with all of the information that 2030 requests, you know, your projected EUI and all of that sort of thing. And so in our most robust energy model projects, we lean on our consultants to provide those, usually in the CD phase, though we will have incremental updates in earlier phases as well. But in the last year, what we've really seen, and I'd say the last year and a half, is that we've been engaging the energy modeling process a lot more proactively instead of simply relying on consultants. And Matthew will talk in just a bit about how we do that. But we use the Autodesk plugin Insight, which works directly out of Revit. And there is a small learning curve, but I would say it's no harder than, you know, Inkscape, and our young designers are blowing our minds with the ability to render and do everything, and, you know, create, use these plugins to really add value to a project. And so, you know, I'm hoping for 2020 that we're approaching 10 projects that we're modeling now. And it's all about those incremental steps. For clarity, we remove anything that was just like a feasibility study that never actually entered a full SD phase. But if it warrants a contract, we include it in our projects list. So that's really about as in-depth as I'm going to get on the actual process of reporting within DDX. If you are considering taking this dive, first off, there's no real consequences to not doing it, right? Even if you sign up and fail to submit by the deadline, there's no reprimand. They don't publicly shame you, you know, and they handle all of your data in a very discreet way. You can search through all of the metadata they have, but there's a process of kind of adding an anonymous layer to all of your reporting, so that, you know, you don't have to worry about embarrassing yourself because this project came in at only 10% over baseline compared to 70, which you were actually shooting for. Like that situation just never comes up. And what we found is that just by having the slight bit of pressure in the back of our mind that we have this reporting to do, we stay proactive in it. One of the really useful tools in our process, and again, we do work with a lot of, you know, we have a lot of existing building owners come to us with projects in, you know, either additions or renovations. And so we're dealing with kind of learning how to benchmark a building, period. Also, we have a number of long-term repeat clients who act as not only developers but project managers, and so slowly they've been, or let me say, they maintain their properties. You know, they own the property and maintain it. And so they've been coming to us recently asking for help in, you know, reevaluating systems on buildings that we've already put in, evaluating how new renovations we're doing on other buildings can compare against what might be just a standard renovation module. And so the Energy Star Portfolio Manager really will handhold you through the process of learning, you know, what is benchmarking? How can anyone do this? And then Energy Star actually gives you the tools to, first you need to understand what you're shooting for. And so you need to understand what the median EUI, or energy use intensity, for your building type is. Energy Star will give you that. And then it'll help kind of guide you through how to input your own projects information in. And so you can see here, these are the benchmark numbers that you're looking for based on building type and use. And this is all free and available on the energystar.gov website. And we've used this quite a bit in actually analyzing our own building, 850 Chapatulas. Like I said, you should recognize this from our sustainability action plan. We went to our admin office and pulled all the energy bills and input them one by one so that we could track it. And what we found was that our energy use was 60%. We were in the better half of operability, but we weren't at 70 or 75 like we had hoped with our project. And so this is again back in 2017 as we were preparing our 2018 sustainability action plan. And so like I said, I look forward to comparing the past 2 years against this to see how we've improved on this. And so Energy Star is a really useful tool to dive into that for you. When you get into the DDX, the Design Data Exchange, this is where the reporting actually happens. And what you'll see is we have a lot of projects that just say not reporting or not modeled, and that's okay. All of these that say not determined, those were old projects that in our first year of reporting, our list was, a couple hundred projects long, probably. Most of them were just not reporting. But that's okay because then along comes the projects that you are starting to report, and that's where you're starting to learn. And so just taking a look at one of these, we are currently wrapping up construction on the new Edna Carr High School in Algiers. And this was actually our very first project that hit our goal number of 70% under benchmark. And that was based on the 2015 numbers. These were run in 2018 as it was in construction. You can see that if we were doing this project today, we would need to take extra efforts to get to 80% savings. But what it gives you is basically the goal EUI, which you'll hear EUI over and over and over again. And then we are just a hair higher than that, and so we call this a success. Compared to our own office and then other projects, it can be really challenging to find ways to drive that EUI down. And what we're doing now is that our sustainability committee in the office is also overlapping with our Revit standards committee in the office, right? And so the wall types and the kind of standard elements that we're baking into our Revit templates have real data that feed right back to our efforts for 2030. That way, even the youngest of our designers are digging through a catalog of excellent wall assemblies and things of that sort. And so we're already starting them with a foot up. One of the ways that this has changed the way we work is we've really had to take on a project by project basis, because 90% of our projects are not LEED certified in any way. A lot of clients don't want to pay that fee for the certification. And so in our project kickoff, we include discussion about what are our opportunities for a sustainable goal on this project. And then that's disseminated through all the design phases and with all the members of the team, so that from the beginning we're already kind of identifying the low-hanging fruit, and then we're also goal setting for more aspirational things. And so I will switch over real quick to a couple of examples of this. So I had mentioned earlier the Edna Carr High School that we're wrapping up construction on right now. Actually, I think they issued substantial completion this very week. This being a school, we were lucky enough that it was required to meet LEED Silver, and so we didn't have to argue on behalf of the sustainable efforts within this project by and large. and it being an entirely new construction building, we also had, master access to any options within the design process. Any of you who've worked on LEED projects are probably quite familiar with the credit summary. And you know that it goes beyond just energy efficiency, but daylighting and views, indoor environmental quality, things of that sort. And so, all of this is probably pretty standard fare for any of you practicing in a LEED project of any sort. We are finalizing the submissions for the LEED Silver certification on this project currently, actually working on it this week. And LEED is very helpful because they do a lot of hand holding. They have a lot of explanation for each credit, and it's a great way to kind of learn what aspects you're looking for in a more sustainable project. And then it's also forcing us to produce daylighting analyses and view studies and everything. When it gets more challenging is when we're landlocked inside of a historic building potentially, and the client isn't really looking for sustainability per se as their main goal, right? And so the Sazerac House project was one of these projects that we wanted to seize whatever opportunities we could, but we also wanted to understand what it means to save a building like this. And so we took a deep dive on embodied carbon, really, because it's such an impactful part of the work we do as a firm. And it's an example of how the 2030 commitment can really inspire you to customize what sustainability means for TPA, for EDR, for WTA, for insert firm name here, right? And so for us, embodied carbon is a big deal. And so in order to be able to speak about it effectively, we went to lengths to actually build our own embodied carbon calculator. If you go to the EPA's website, they publish a 2006 standard of the embodied carbon per kilogram of every building material you could look for, right? And so we built this tool out that our designers can use throughout the process. And because we're working in Revit, you can actually create just a schedule that exports different wall types by type and gives you a you can add parameters to it to export the total volume in cubic feet, its weight, things of that sort. We work in volume in cubic feet, and this study was actually done for Richardson Memorial Hall, the Tulane School of Architecture building. And so we exported out all of the heavy masonry, all of the steel beams, all the wood framing and everything in that project. And this carbon calculator that we've built calculates, how many pounds of material we're keeping out of landfill, how many tons of CO2 that we are keeping out of the air by doing this. And then we've even hyperlinked into here. So we're going to remember this number, 1773. If you come to this EPA greenhouse gas calculator and you put in 1773, and that is, let me double check this. Oh wait, y'all probably still see the spreadsheet, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay, let me hop over to here. Okay, 1773. So the equivalent of the embodied carbon within Richardson Memorial Hall equals taking 383 vehicles off the road for an entire year, or 4,000 barrels of oil, right? Suddenly, this is giving you the ability to speak about a project in a way that you couldn't do before, right? And it's talking about some of the things that we don't have total control over, aside from just restoration and maintenance, in actual numbers that we can compare against things that people understand better. And what we found is that this has been a really useful tool for us in talking about our sustainability goals as a firm. And so the Sazerac house, we kept 5,000 tons of waste out of landfill and 2.5 metric tons of CO2. We can break it down by specific material type. And so even these total historic renovation projects, we're able to talk in very modern terms about the work that is embodied in there. And then we have opportunities that arise along the way. One such opportunity was that in the 11th hour of our construction documents phase on this project, the master distiller from Kentucky finally gave us all of his specs for what he needs to run the distillery making Sazerac rye on Canal Street. And the volume of chilled water he needed to cool the cooking fermentation tanks equaled the entire chill water system for our entire HVAC system in the building. And we were out of roof space. We couldn't put another chiller up there. So we had to think on our feet. And so way back here in the back corner of the building, we installed these are systems that are usually used on campus-wide type facilities, hospitals, things of that sort. And it's an ice storage tank. This is actually the smallest one that this company has ever built. But it has 2,200 gallons of water in it that overnight, when the energy demand is low, we can run a freezer on it and freeze those 2,200 gallons into 14,000 pounds of ice. And so in the morning when the distiller arrives, he's got this giant tank full of ice that he can use as a heat sink and just dump heat from the fermenters into that. And by doing so, we're not running a second ginormous chiller throughout the entirety of the day while distillery operations are in process. And we're able to even use it as an educational element within the project. And so within the distillery tour, you learn about the ice tank, and they should be seeing their return on investment on the energy savings of this within the first few years. And then all of that, we're able to kind of conglomerate into equivalencies that really kind of add punch to your ability to speak about value added to your clients in these projects. So we'll take a step back from kind of big picture now and dive a little bit into some of the capabilities our firm has started to take on as a result of trying to engage this 2030 commitment wholeheartedly. And as I mentioned earlier, one of those has been the active use of the plugin Insight in Revit. And so I'll hand it over to Matthew, and he will walk you through. Are y'all seeing Matthew, are you seeing the TBA logo?
Yeah, I see it.
All right, and I can scroll down if you want, let me know.
Okay, yeah, just go ahead and scroll down. Hello, everybody. My name is Matthew Byer at Trapolin Peer. I work with Shea, and I'm going to dive into how we energy model specifically in our firm and how we're going to, how we specifically use this beyond its capabilities for a few select projects. So we use a program called Insight. It's a direct plugin for Revit that uses actual BIM modeled information. It's a bit different than what Shea was talking about earlier with Portfolio Manager or DDX, which kind of operates similarly to ResCheck or ComCheck, where you're like inputting actual data. Insight actually takes your BIM model and calculates energy usage and your EUI, and you can use that data to create simulations, to make design decisions. We found it particularly helpful really from every phase, from early SD through CDs, and then actually after a building is built, to test that data against what we did early on in SDs. The data that you input can be as basic as, building massing, really basic objects where you can start making decisions on building orientation and, percentage of operable open windows and things like that, while making assumptions about more specific things like your HVAC system and, your plug efficiency. But we find that we're able to use it really early on to set a benchmark and set design goals, and then try to meet those goals as the model develops. A little bit about Insight. It's actually a free program if you have Autodesk BIM 360. I think if you don't have BIM 360, they do have an option to buy cloud credits so that you can actually use it. They do offer free cloud credits as a startup. So if this is something that you're just getting interested in, you can actually download it and run a few tests on a few projects, have some of your early young designers poke around in it and just see how it can actually benefit your firm specifically. But there are different levels of kind of specificity you can get into with Insight. Again, starting with, talking about that early benchmark. It's tied into DDX specifically to have that benchmark available in Insight. You can, like I said earlier, you can work on, thinking about building orientation, window shades, your roof and wall assemblies, the heat loss and gain of that, lighting efficiency, daylighting and occupancy, plug load, HVAC systems, operating schedules, which is kind of really important. And then I find it really excels at figuring out and calculating solar panels and photovoltaic data. So what Shea's showing you here is kind of what, scroll up a little bit. So the two primary things that it shows you in Insight, and this was a case study that we did for a project that's converting an historic school building into apartments. And this is the benchmark comparison. This is kind of the first thing that you see. So you get an EUI mean number, which is that number that you'll input into DDX, and then it also gives you energy usage. So this showing on the right is dollars per square foot per year. I was kind of skeptical of this at first, but the more I'm getting used to it and the more that I see data comparing it, this is generally a pretty accurate number. So what this shows, at a benchmark condition, without modifying anything, that the owner is going to pay 98 cents per square foot per year, which is a lot of money. So scroll up, Shea, to the graph and the data that we're looking at. Yeah. So we found one of the things, it's really hard having conversations with owners about why it's important to have these sustainability considerations in their project when it can potentially cost more. Scroll up to the graph.
Okay.
There we go. So for this particular owner, they were really interested in looking into the possibility of having, switching from their historic windows to more efficient low E windows, considering a geothermal system and considering a solar system. And it was a developer that was considering different types of tax credits. So, that has a certain impact on when you can resell a building after developing it. So we took the data from Insight, compared it with real cost estimates for implementing these systems. So how much would it cost to have a geothermal system? How much would it cost to have windows and solar panels? And then, we created an Excel document that basically told us how long it takes for that system to pay itself off. And in this case, the solar panels on this roof, which the particular building that we're talking about was a really prime candidate for solar panels. And we found that it would pay itself off for 5 years, which was a huge sell for the client. Geothermal energy would pay itself off after 14. And then we were able to look at this a little bit more closely and determine that, how much their bill would be reduced annually by this, and kind of apply that to each unit. So if there are 50 apartments, we can figure out exactly how much each apartment's energy usage would be estimated. So this was a really successful case study that we kind of used as a template moving forward. We've learned a lot just from talking from solar panel subs and geothermal vendors, try to get some good benchmark rule of thumb metrics in determining, how much your rate of return will be, how efficient these systems will be. And like I said, this was all done by Insight, which is, this is an existing historic building, but when we look at these parameters, we can actually reduce the energy efficiency quite a bit. I mean, in addition to these parameters that we look at and other historic buildings, we also perform quite a few daylight studies. I think it seems like almost every building now we do daylight studies. For one building in particular, which is a historic building in the corridor or in CBD, we're carving 2 light wells through this historic building for residential units. And we're going to have bridges going through these light wells, with a certain amount of opacity and transparency through that material. So we've recently just been doing light studies to figure out how to design these bridges through these light wells so we don't block, light to the units that's supposed to be providing light to, even things like how to design our parapets for these light wells, and, what height these things can be so that they grade or reflect light down into the light well. I think the challenge for us, like part of the growing pain, was trying to figure out who in the firm should be responsible of all this kind of knowledge. Is it Shea? Is it me? Or is it everybody? And I mean, I think there's too much information for one person to kind of know everything about, this, not only insight and modeling, but also reporting and the 2030 challenge. But we also at the same time kind of understood that we want everybody to know a little bit about it. So we've kind of come up with this middle ground technique or policy where, we have a couple specialists that know their specific part of this aspect, but we still require everybody to, be able to have a conversation about it and to be able to talk about it and fill in and learn more from kind of the specialists that we have in their field.
Yeah, and what that allows us to do is to really focus on the things you're most interested on. The fact that I just geek out about embodied carbon within a building, I can run on a Friday evening while drinking a Sazerac. Got to stay on brand, right? And kind of spit out these calculations and then put it into this format that someone else can use. And it's enjoyable for me, as opposed to, needing to calculate R value of roof assemblies, which I don't want to be doing that. That's not my interest. But yeah, Insight has really kind of surprisingly enabled us to get our hands dirty in the process, and to have informed discussions with the client and with our consultants at various stages throughout the project. And as the entire team has grown in kind of Revit standard proficiency, and we're getting cleaner and cleaner models these days, we're getting better and better information out of said models. And so it's because of those sorts of things that Matthew and a number of our other designers are really able to dive in at this level. And some of those metrics that he was talking about building orientation, daylighting, HVAC, like here's how you interface with that in the software. And so Matthew, if you could speak just for a second about your ability to really kind of grab a metric and modify it and see whether it's even worth the investment.
Yeah, and it actually happens in real time. So these are kind of widgets that come out of the plugin Insight, and you can actually select what system that you want, and this is a graphic representation of how much better or less efficient each one of those options in that system are. So I think I'm looking at HVAC right there. You know, there's an option for whatever you have modeled in BIM. There are very efficient HVAC systems and there are less efficient HVAC systems. And you can see how just selecting that will impact, you know, the cost of, you know, your annual cost basically per square foot. And that's for all these parameters. And it happens live, so you can really just play with these things. I mean, I enjoy doing it, just sliding these things all around just to see what matters and what doesn't. But then you can also save these models, you know, as a benchmark or just different versions. And then you can revisit them later to say, you know what, we thought we could get this, but this didn't perform so well. But it's nice that it breaks all these systems up separately so that in the case that you're working in a historic building and you have 4 walls that you can't do anything with, but you're rebuilding the roof, maybe you can up the roof, you know, heat loss and heat gain, and you know, still get the numbers that you're looking for.
So that about wraps up everything we had. I hope that what this shows is that even diving in earnest is still a benefit to your firm. We're now looking at about, I think we're on our 4th year of reporting. And we've come a long way in that time. I wouldn't have imagined that we'd be outputting these sorts of abilities by this time in-house. You know, typically we had to rely on specialists for this sort of thing in the past. And what's really been interesting, still having connections to those specialists and actually still having them working on some of our LEED accredited projects or certified projects is our ability to then test our own models against theirs and see, you know, are we pretty accurate? Are we wildly, you know, like some of the first numbers we got were threw up red flags, and we were like, okay, this can't be right for some reason, you know, and really digging in and learning how to put good information in and get valuable information out.
Thank you guys so much. This is extremely informative, very well presented, and I appreciate especially your offer to be a mentor / you know, offer guidance through this process, because it is truthfully still a little daunting. But I think just the notion of just jumping in, and I love the idea of doing the case study of your office. Seems like an easy kind of model for yourself to, you know, just jump in. And I was curious if through your analysis, if you determine that certain project types are easier to achieve net zero over others, like residential versus commercial, things like that. Actually,
I may have some of that information here. So this draws very heavily from, you can see the source down here, the greenest building, quantifying the environmental value of building reuse. That publication has been very, very helpful for us in understanding there are certain carbon impacts to converting one type of building to another. And in a couple of cases, the situation actually exists, and it's usually when you transition imagine a giant cotton warehouse, and then you turn that into high-end condos. Come to find out, the way the math works out, it's you're losing energy efficiency by that sort of conversion. Yeah, so those sorts of projects, what that enables us to do is not advocate on behalf of demoing the warehouse, but to help guide our clients in saying, maybe this isn't the right property you're looking for. You know, and so we've built in, you know, a number of these kind of metrics from that source. Again, like I said, I would totally go and steal from other sustainability action plans, flip to the back, see if they have citations, and then go to those sources, you know. But yeah, we've, by and large, it's still fair to say that the greenest building is the one you don't have to build, right? The one that already exists. In what I can say is that in very rare cases that doesn't hold true. But we have yet to actually have a project that was trying to do that. But we can certainly help guide clients in saying, okay, well, if you buy an office building as opposed to a downtown warehouse in the warehouse district, you'll have a better return on investment of your conversion, you know. And so yes, that information is out there.
As far as the action plan too, you may have said this, and apologize if I didn't hear it, but how quickly after you sign the challenge do you typically submit that action plan? Because that was a really beautiful, thorough action plan that you had put together. And I was just curious, you know, the timeline to do something like that.
I promise to be candid and honest and informal. You're supposed to, within year one, from submitting basically your letter of intent, you're supposed to publish your sustainability action plan within that first year. We became such perfectionists in it and had such grand visions and other things we wanted to talk about, and wellness and resilience, and we wanted to do a case study and collect energy bills and everything. So what we did was we started this big book at that time, and then we kept a one-pager off to the side in InDesign that we updated with critical elements of it as needed. And at that 1 year mark, what we submitted was the one pager, and it didn't contain the case study. It kind of distilled down a lot of the more in-depth things that we included in our SAP. And then we were able to continue working on the book. And so instead of that being submitted we submitted the one pager in 2017. In 2018 is when we published the kind of more grand version, and that's going to be our source for updating every 2 years. You know, we'll have hopefully a different case study with more information, some updates on how we've improved, because 2030 really wants you to take a look at how you live in your life as well, you know. And so we've started to look at our recycling program, even down to the granular level of having office arguments about whether we should have individual creamers or not for our coffee, you know. And so what it shows is that it's causing this trickle down effect of discussions to happen that go well beyond our design catalog, you know.
I have more questions, but does anyone else on the call have any that they'd like to ask?
Yeah.
I got a few technical ones. You two, Alec? Well, I'll ask my question. Have you guys done any post-occupancy? All of the modeling, right, is based off of the kind of theoretical Revit output. So have you gone back and looked at any of the performance of an actual built structure to see if it matches up with your projected usages?
Yes and no. Some of the projects that we've had the most access to post-occupancy data on are projects that were done prior to us taking this commitment, right?
Sure.
But that doesn't mean that we can't still engage it in a meaningful way. And it takes the right client and the right project to do that. You know, not because if the client is, even if the client is going to hold on to the apartment building, let's say, and operate it, unless it's written into the terms of their leasing agreements, we still don't have access to all of the units' energy efficiency. But what we are getting is more kind of macro numbers, and what that tends to involve is things like the fresh air unit on the roof, if you're providing an AON unit and things of that sort. And what we found is those things are like, our clients are coming back to us and being like, please help me find some, like I'm hemorrhaging money in the fresh air unit here. And so what we're doing as a firm is we're starting to experiment, and it's a long timeline to do this, but we're starting to experiment with alternative methods for that. And so another multifamily project that we just completed, actually we built the project without a single fresh air unit on it, and instead dispersed fresh air infusion on an apartment by apartment basis within package units. And so what we're hoping is that a couple of years from now, we'll have information from that, and we'll get to see, have we really made an impact on building operations and energy use, while still meeting the intent of the code. You know, we get why a fresh air unit is important. And in fact, in post-COVID times, it's going to be even more important. But we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot by having mechanical code that's written thinking about, you know, thinking in a silo of just turnover of fresh air, and not kind of thinking more integrated into an entire building assembly, when we might be able to do something much more simple and still achieve that goal. So, you know, like I said, our office was a perfect example because we didn't have to ask anyone for the information. And then it's been largely our long-term repeat customers who, like the study Matthew did was, you know, that was a client of ours from the Pesh building. And he had learned some lessons from that project. We had learned some lessons from that project. And so as we were looking at this old school to convert into apartments, we were now coming at it with a much higher level of base information, to help guide the early decisions on systems even, going into this building.
And maybe just one more for you, Matthew. On the Revit side, are you finding that you have to do a lot of the kind of manual input of R values and kind of data input into the material assignments, or is it relatively baked into what's already in the materials in Revit?
You can. So especially when you're starting off with just a massing and maybe some windows in it, you can make assumptions about what those values are. So kind of with that slider scale that we showed earlier, be, you know, an R13 wall versus an R, you know, 20 or something, or same thing for a roof. So you can kind of make those sliders early on. And then when you do develop a more developed model, like Shea was saying earlier, we're really working on our wall assemblies and materials that you know, thermal data, the heat loss and gain from each material is programmed into the Revit walls, and Insight can take that into account.
Gotcha.
It's been a benefit for us to have our sustainability group and our Revit standards group in, you know, ideally there's at least one or two people who are on both committees basically within our firm. That way, when we're building those standards, we're baking in the information we need, so that the next model is even better, you know.
Do you know, does the AIA have any goals to like take all this information that they're getting and share back so that people can learn, you know, some of the...
Actually, I should have pulled it up, and I'll find it and I'll email it to you to send to the group if you want. I believe it was in the summer of 2019, after the reporting deadline, which was March or April. Architect Magazine actually published kind of a meta-analysis of the 2030 commitment, and they published, you know, how many firms in the country are signed up. You can search by state, and there's only a few in Louisiana. And so, you know, when Z put out his original call, I think they were the only ones in Louisiana. Since then, I think we have 3 or 4 now. And I really appreciate the small firm exchange trying to build that up, especially in the smaller firms, who are probably more prone to think, oh, well, there's no way we can do this. But I'll find that article because it was really compelling. Because, and again, everything's made anonymous, so they're not calling out any firm or whatever. But they were pretty candid in talking about the successes and the failures. And like, how many buildings had actually achieved the 70% that we were shooting for. But again, you can't control what you don't understand. And so the first step is to get in and start to learn how to understand it. And to see those sorts of meta-analysis is encouraging, to say the least. And it makes you feel like the efforts are worthwhile. And so, like I said, I'll find that this afternoon and send it to you guys, and y'all can send it out. It was a pretty fascinating article.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I know we're a little bit past time, so does anybody else have anything they want to ask that's pressing? Otherwise, thank you so much for your time and for what you're doing for New Orleans and the world. Really appreciate it, and thanks for the inspiration as well.
Yeah, and it's our pleasure. And please do make the commitment. Just jump in the pool. That's what we did in the first year. We were terrible at it. And I'd say for the first 18 months, I just kind of avoided the questions from Paula and would just disappear out of the room when the topic came up. But once we got into it and we were like, wait, this isn't painful at all, and it's something we can actually, it's value we can add to the client, and it's a way that we can talk about our work that reaches people, so do not hesitate to pick up the phone and give me a call. My cell phone number is in my email signature. We don't have all the answers, but we probably know where to look to find it. So, and we'll share freely,
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we'll keep the conversation going with the small firm exchange at large too. Maybe we'll have another session or something down the road. So
Sure. I look forward
to again.
3rd of November,
Cool. All right. Have a good one.